Welcome to the Kriya Yoga Podcast, a source of inspiration and actionable education for those inspired towards the goal of enlightenment through yogic meditation. Through these interviews, discussions, and reflections, it is my intention to share the possibility of waking up to the reality of self and God realization, and to remind you of the immortal words of Paramahansa Yogananda. Don't look back. Don't look to the left or to the right. Look straight ahead to the goal and go all the way in this lifetime. I'm Ryan Kurczak, and I'll be your host on this adventure of spiritual self-discovery. Welcome back, everyone, to the Kriya Yoga Podcast. I'm here once again with Shalin Tetro, who is the owner of Living Lotus Ayurveda. She's a Vedic astrologer, Ayurvedic educator, mentor, and spiritual teacher, and an Ayurvedic doctor. She's also a member of the Kriya Yoga Alliance and often gives talks for the Kriya Yoga Alliance on Sundays. And she'll be joining us in May in Encinitas, California, where myself, Ryan Strong, Shalin, and a few others will be presenting a Kriya Yoga immersion. So welcome back, Shalin. It's good to see you.
Thanks so much. I'm really excited about May. I know you and Ryan have known each other for so long, so many years. Has it been like 20 years maybe? And
it's been about 20 years. Yeah, actually longer.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. And I maybe have known you just for several now, but to meet in person will be really wonderful. I look forward.
Yeah. I think it'll be a good immersion. And it'll be great to have you there because oftentimes a lot of people say to me, well, where are all the female Kriya Yoga teachers?
Oh, right.
Yes. I always tell them they're in California because that's where they all are. So that's where we're going to be.
Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah.
But you're not from California, are you? Where are you from?
Oh, yeah. No, I'm from south of Boston. So,
okay. Yeah.
Small town called Acushnet.
And your practice, Living Lotus Ayurveda, where is that at in case people are curious?
So I see patients online, so it's everywhere basically, but in person, my practice is in Western Massachusetts.
Okay.
Near a city called Northampton. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. Good. Well, today we're going to be talking about a really special creative endeavor that you finally put together and are able to offer to the world. You've got a book ready to go, right?
Yeah. Finally, it's been years actually. And it's a book that I co-authored with a mentor and teacher of mine, an Ayurvedic teacher, Mary Thompson.
Okay.
And I always was very inspired by how she presented and taught Ayurveda. Mm-hmm. And right when I was graduating, she sort of put out there to the class that she was very open to collaborating. And for most of my life, I've gotten such joy in collaborating with people that I jumped at the chance. And so she and I began teaching together. And then I just brought up the idea. I'm like, hey, let's write a book together. Since we're teaching, let's write a book. And she was all for it.
So how long have you been working on this book?
Oh gosh, long time, like six years.
Yeah.
I think. And there were starts.
Have you rewritten it any time? And have you rewritten it many times? It was just such a long process. There were starts and stops. And did you say, have I written it? Rewritten it. Yeah.
There were some rewrites for sure. And then there were just like periods of time where I would just write like pages and pages and not even know what I wrote.
Right.
And then have to read it and get to know it again. And yeah.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. And so what is the title of the book and what's the book about?
So it's Garbhavati, an Ayurvedic overview of pregnancy.
Okay.
And so Garbhavati means pregnant woman or pregnancy. It's Sanskrit.
Okay.
And it's intended for students of Ayurvedic medicine and practitioners of Ayurveda, but also students of any of the Vedic sciences. Mm-hmm. So if you have some familiar with Sankhya philosophy or Jyotish or yoga, you'll still find this book to be really useful because there's a lot of similar terminology as the other Vedas in it. Right. But I also think that it's really helpful for anyone in the field of birthing, midwives and doctors who want to start to try to bridge the ancient science of Ayurveda with what's happening now in modern science.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when you're writing this book, when you think over the contents of it, what are some of the key principles that you really want to get across with what you wrote?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. So it's actually a book that's divided in different parts. And so Mary, she pretty much wrote the first part of the book, and then I wrote the second part. And so we wanted to give people learning from this book an opportunity to be very practical with their clients and patients on how to support the birth mother through every part of her pregnancy. Right. So giving like really practical teachings on how the birth mother herself can nourish herself, and other things that she can do, other practices she can do to really sort of like inspire the greatest amount of health for herself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But then also I really wanted to create this book as like a resource of marrying the curiosity of students with the ancient texts. So in both of our sections, but in particularly my section, it's heavily referenced and cited with the ancient texts like the Charaka Samhita, Sushruta Samhita. A lot of the ancient texts in Ayurveda are cited so that I can, I really wanted to inspire the students. Okay, now go deeper. Look here, and you dive in. And because I really want to keep this ancient science of Ayurveda alive.
Right. And so I know this probably sounds like a very simple, silly question to you, but just because you understand this, but for people who might not necessarily have an understanding of how Ayurveda can be very helpful to women and to mothers and so on, what about it? What about this Ayurvedic way, this Ayurvedic understanding? How does it support the birth process, and how does it support women's health in ways that maybe modern medicine just doesn't?
Well, I think that it really helps on a fundamental level because it teaches the birth mother how to nourish herself. So one of the many things I love about Ayurvedic medicine is that it attunes us to the rhythms of nature. And one way we can do that is through food. So what is being grown in that particular climate or region where a person lives, a birth mother lives, how she can nourish herself.
Right. So, and what are some just general key guidelines? I know they'll read this in your book, but what are some general key guidelines about that, how that's done or how to think about it?
Yeah. So Mary in particular goes through the nourishment part that's in the first part of the book. And so she'll talk about use sweet rasa herbs. And so rasa means taste, and, sweet, the quality of sweetness. It's not necessarily sugar, but it's a series of different types of herbs that are almost like food, like say licorice root, for example, that you can mix into different kinds of milk that will then nourish the tissues of the birth mother so that she can then nourish her fetus, her developing fetus.
Right. Yeah, I understand licorice. Is gokshara one of those? Because that always seems to be kind of sweet when I think about it.
Yep, that does have a sweet taste. Yeah, we don't reference it too much in this book. It's more like licorice root, shatavari would be another food-like herb that we use. Ghee is used, so clarified butter. That is a food that has the ability to go through the different dhatus or tissues of the body.
Right.
To the deepest tissue, which is our reproductive tissues.
Right. Yeah.
Where the fetus
I always make the joke that, once you talk to an Ayurvedic practice, I'm sorry, you cut out there just for a moment. What was that you just said?
Nope, I was quiet.
Okay.
Yeah.
I always feel that when you go to an Ayurvedic doctor, you're pretty safe to say that you're going to come out of there with them telling you just need to like drink a gallon of ghee every day.
I know, it's so useful. We use it for a lot of different things. It's true because it's so nourishing, and it has this prabhav. It has this special mysterious energy or action of penetrating the tissues of the body. So
right.
Yeah.
And so when we think about, surely when we think about our health and our well-being and the health and well-being of nurturing, a life and so on. But if you took these principles, would they would they carry over just to help support a person's like spiritual practice?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think I talked about that several talks ago during one of our Kriya Yoga Alliance services, where the more that you can nourish what we call our ojas, so that is our essential strength and immunity and buffer against all different kinds of stressors of life, the more that we can nourish that, i.e. through proper food and regular routines, the more of a stabilizing force it has for us. So when we do our kriyas, i.e. just simply sitting in meditation and, working with our prana, we have the container that can hold those subtle essences more steadily.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about this for a few reasons. One of them is, I mentioned that a lot of people ask me, well, where are all the female Kriya Yoga teachers? And there does seem to be a few more male teachers visible than female teachers in that regard. And it's good to have you here because I'm curious what your thoughts are on how a woman needs to approach spiritual practice or Kriya practice. Is it that different than, a man or a male and so on?
Yeah. Oh, that's such a great question. Wow. Awesome question. I think there's a lot of similarities, but sure, just by nature of women, and I'm saying that very generally, we embody that primordial feminine essence of creativity, Shakti. We both do, men and women both do, but we tend to embody it more fully just by the very fact that we can create life and grow, sustain life within us. We have to really attune ourselves to the cycle of the moon. And so if a woman is going through kind of her fertile years and she has her cycle, then the time to take a pause from doing the more subtle practices of Kriya, it's a time to do less and do more rest. So we need to attune ourselves to that a little bit more specifically than I think men do.
Yeah. What about just the practice itself, like how it affects the system or how it affects the body? Is that just approached fairly similar, or is there a difference there?
I think it is approached fairly similar.
Okay.
Aside from paying attention to the cycle of the moon. Yeah.
Right. And one of the questions that I often get, because when I teach Kriya Yoga and the way I was taught Kriya Yoga is, for example, when you're cycling the current through the spine, when you're meditating on the spinal pathway and you're feeling the breath moving through the spine, I was taught, and you probably were too, that women shouldn't do that when they're pregnant or when they're menstruating.
Yes, exactly.
And so I've got two questions there. The first one is, why? Okay.
So when a woman is menstruating, and generally, this is very generally speaking, it's the first 4 days of the cycle. So when I was saying attuning ourselves to the moon cycle, it's true. I need to explain these things better. When I say moon cycle, I always think in my mind that correlates with a woman's menstrual cycle. Right. So the first 4 days of our menstrual cycle is when we take pause, because we need to allow the physical body to simply do its process, its letting go process, its cleansing process. And so if we are also trying to do like deep kriyas at that time, it's sort of at cross purposes. It's like we need to give our physical bodies. I feel like women in general are a little bit more connected to the earth, and men are a little bit more connected to like the ethos, and then it's the coming together where we can see like pure beauty and magic. And then with pregnancy, again, it's so we're kind of from the subtle essences of things, we're bringing that into our body. And so to do a lot of kriyas at that time, it may be too disturbing for the development of that fetus. It can imprint what we call vikruti. Vikruti is sort of influences of the present moment onto a physical being, and it can create imbalance. And I go into that in the book, in the textbook.
is that due to like the different kinds of prana and what they need to be doing?
Yeah, well, imagine like prana running through a woman working with her prana up her spine, and then there's this being, her fetus is there, which is like much more smaller, and that current going through the fetus is too much for the little being, because we're working with the physical, not just the subtle. You see, we have to, we really need to go inward and attune to that time.
Yeah. Okay.
What's happening for that little fetus. But that idea of Vikruti is really something that we talk about in the textbook, kind of the imprints through the generations from the grandmother. It begins with the grandmother. So when the grandmother has the birth mother, when she's gestating the birth mother, all of the eggs are being formed. That then the birth mother, those are her eggs. They're already formed when she's a fetus. I know it makes you think.
Wow.
About it. Yeah. So the health of the grandmother, her health, her state of health, her mind, her physical state of health is already affecting her grandbaby, her future grandbaby.
Yeah. Okay. So what was that term again? Vikruti? Was that
Vikruti.
Okay.
Current state. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's just.
It is a little bit of a brain twister. It is.
Well, I guess that's, the thing is you can't really do a whole lot about that because your grandmother was doing something way before you were even,
I know,
born.
but you can do it through Tarpana.
Tell me about
Tarpana. So that's something I've been working with more currently for myself, but also now with people that I work with, my patients and clients and friends. Is Pitru Tarpana is a ritual done to honor the ancestors.
Okay. And
so through that very, very sincere intention of ritual and offering, it gives the opportunity, now we're going back to subtle, of course, to allow the karmas or the desires of our ancestors to be released. So you make them an offering, you call them in, you make an offering to them. So any of their desires that are still sort of present in our generational line, there's an opportunity for that to be ended and healed and transformed.
Huh. Yeah.
So things are timeless, Ryan.
Yeah.
There is no time. But being a birth mother, we condense things into time and space. So that's a whole other wow.
Yeah. So is that an Agori practice or?
No, it's not necessarily an Agori practice. Yeah.
Okay.
Although I did learn it from a teacher who is. So.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
Well, that just opens up a whole other way of kind of thinking about things because, one thing that I've noticed, particularly like with counseling, working on yourself, is that once you work on yourself, then it's as if after those many years of working on yourself, it's as if you realize, well, now what you're working on is actually the ancestral karma, as if you go from the personal to the. So
yes.
is that like a similar idea, similar process?
It absolutely is. Yes. And I'm feeling very called. So I love working with that right before beings come into this lifetime, this experience, and after those of people have left. I'm really into those two windows there, working with that. I think they're very potent, very, very potent.
Well, that I want to stay on our topic, but I want to take a little bit of a detour if you're all right with that.
Yeah, sure. Love detours.
Because I know you're a Vedic astrologer as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Humbly aspiring. Yes.
Well, I'm sure you're just
never ending.
So I've been thinking about this a good bit, and what occurred to me was when we're children, like maybe from like 1 to 7 years.
Yeah.
It seems to me like during those years, for most people, you are unconscious. Meaning that there's not necessarily a sense of presence there about let's do this, let's not do that. It's more of like things are just happening and it's a present moment, but it's not necessarily a conscious present moment.
Correct. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
And it occurred to me that during those first 7 years, what you're probably actually doing is re-experiencing the past momentum of your previous lifetimes.
Yeah.
And hang with me here. Okay.
I'm with you.
This goes a little ways. And so then the experiences you have when you're a child, and I'm just choosing between 1 to 7 years.
Yeah.
Whatever happened with your parents, whatever happened with your culture and so on, that it was just that the parents and the culture provided the opportunity for you to see the momentum from your past karma.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of people blame their parents for things or blame their culture for things.
Yeah.
And I understand that, because you still need to work through it. But really, it would have happened anyway if you just would have been put in a different situation.
Yeah.
So there's that.
Yeah.
And then as you move into the teenage years, you become kind of conscious, where you see, oh, this isn't right, or I want to capitalize on this, or I want to appreciate this, or I feel this grace from the family.
Yeah.
And it's as though in those teenage years, you start to recognize how you're working with the ancestral karma, how you work, how you see it. Now you can work with it. And then my sense is that once a person moves beyond the teenage years, once that impulsiveness passes, and hopefully they become an adult, that now you have the actual conscious capacity to work with your ancestral karma and what you came in with. Does this, you follow where I'm getting at?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do feel like that children under 7, I mean, I think children start to form memories of this experience, the here and now. I think maybe just a touch younger, but not much, where they can recall a lot of what's happening in the now. But I think they're actually sort of a little bit at the mercy of their parents, particularly their mother's karmas at that age. Yeah. And I think in terms of like how a person as they get older becomes more aware of it, of like, they're not just like at the whim, they can bring their awareness to their karmas. I think you're on point with that. I do love it. Yeah. Teenagers are very impulsive for sure. So are little ones, but teenagers, they start acting on those impulses big time in the outer world. Right.
Yeah.
And then it's the outer world that is saying like, I don't know if you should do that.
Right. So bringing in astrology into it, then, I've heard that when you're looking at someone's chart, when they're a child, that really you need to look at, for example, the parents' chart, not necessarily the kids.
Exactly.
Yeah. Any thoughts on that or elaboration?
Yeah, I agree. Well, I mean, that just made me immediately jump to Ayurveda, where whenever I work with a young one, a baby or, a young child, or even a teenager, I treat the parents if they let me.
Right.
Yeah. I work with, okay, what's happening for the mother, and working with them very directly if the mother is nursing.
Okay. So can you say more about that? Like what's going on there?
If the baby, for example, is having difficulty with elimination, like a lot of gas and pain, I work with the birth mother. So I work with, okay, how can we work with nourishing your diet? Are there foods that are going to be activating? Yeah. So it's like a direct link there. So I treat the birth mother. Right. A little bit the baby, we do kinds of body therapy for the little one, but working with the mother. So her karmas influence the baby so directly because she's nourishing. Right. Nourishing the baby.
But energetically as well. I mean, because if the family has a particular kind of energetic pattern to it, like the child unit is going to really kind of be feeding off of that, like the nourishment, that energetic nourishment from the family is also going to be informing how the child perceives the world and how the child reacts.
Without a doubt. Yeah.
So
even the father, could I say something about the birth father?
Oh, absolutely.
Well, again, going back to epigenetics. So like the ovum is already formed through the grandmother's gestation of the birth mother. Okay. Right. I know that's like a little brain twister a little bit.
Yeah.
But at conception, it's it's the father's, his tendencies and how he's taking care of himself that really affect the embryo and fetus in the sperm cell, like the vikruti, the quality. And so it's so important for the birth father to be as committed to caring for their own health, mental health, physical health. You know, there's studies out there. I referenced them in the textbook. There's studies on, you know, fathers that had alcoholism, how that impacted like the heart health of the fetus. There's a direct correlation between that. Similarly, with fathers who are obese, the tendency for that child to develop early onset type 2 diabetes and obesity, for example, went way up, way up. So the vikruti, the present moment of the birth father, is really impactful, really impactful.
Right.
Yeah.
So in a way, you know, the topic of your book and these ideas, this is good for people to know, because if we want to experience a more enlightened world, then people who want to have families and want to have children, they need to pay attention to themselves, because that's essentially what's going to create that next generation.
Yeah. Yeah. And what an opportunity.
It's not random.
It's not random. And it's like, what an opportunity that we have. Like, we just take care of ourselves, and that helps everything going forward. It's so simple in a way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So simple.
And I'm curious, you know, when you talk about working with family, maybe it's different. Maybe people are different who are interested in, say, Ayurveda and yoga. Maybe they have a different kind of capacity for awareness. But when you were talking about that, it made me think of like in psychology, like the family systems model. Not necessarily internal family systems, but just the family systems model in general, where, you know, if a kid is having an issue, what the therapist does is he treats the family, because the kid is the result of the influences of the family. Right? Rather than the kid's just being difficult, like, well,
for a reason.
for a reason. So I'm curious, you know, when you work with people, is it fairly easy to kind of convey these ideas, and they understand them and take them and run with them, just because it's kind of a different...
Well, that's a good question. Yeah, it depends. It depends on where they're at. And sometimes, you know, the physical or mental suffering is so great that they're just willing to try anything. Right. But I try to approach, you know, my patients with the care of a mother. Yeah. So they feel that support, and then feel safe enough to make shifts and changes. And one of my favorite things is, so I'll work with a pregnant birth mother through her pregnancy, and, you know, do body work and offer, you know, the nutrition and herbs that are indicated for her. And then, you know, she gives birth. So then she'll come in with the baby, and I'll work on the birth mother, because that's a process as well. The postpartum care is pretty extensive in Ayurvedic medicine. Yeah. And so often the birth mother will come in with her newborn, and they're both on the table, and I'm working on the birth mother, and the baby immediately will just go very calm and peaceful. It's really wonderful to see. Yeah.
So mothers have a lot of responsibility for the state of their offspring. Yeah,
it's a huge responsibility.
Yeah.
Huge responsibility.
One question, which I'm sure you might have had to deal with this, and maybe it'll bring up some controversial things. I don't know, but
ooh, goody.
Well, no, we'll see.
I'm just kidding.
You know, in my personal life, I have a really good ability to stick my foot in my mouth and say things that I probably shouldn't. And I've learned to be a little more tactful and appropriate. So I'm going to do my best here. Okay. So what happens though? I've thought about this a lot, also being an astrologer. You know, sometimes people come and they're trying to have children, and it's just not working. And you see in their birth chart that there's so many afflictions. And my sense over these years of practicing astrology and meditating is, you know, maybe that's not your actual dharma. Maybe those afflictions are there not to punish you, right? But because it's not for you this time.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah.
So how do you approach that? I figure you probably have more experience with this.
Well, so in the past, would you let people know that you were seeing certain things?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I try to encourage what you're talking about. Like, okay, if I'm seeing that the tendencies in their chart is that they probably most likely won't have children, I will talk to them about the other aspects of their chart that shows a lot of support.
Right.
Just planting the seed a little bit there. I do think miracles can happen.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely, they can. And
I will say that I will let them know, yes, difficulty. And, and I myself had a lot of difficulty conceiving. So I really do feel for people that have that deep desire to want to have children and then cannot. Like, I really do feel for them. You have to go through that grief, and I really respect that. But yeah, there's so much other potential there. There's so many other ways to have babies, right?
Yeah.
So you can adopt, or you can even just birth something else. And like, that could be so necessary for the nurturing of our time, our here and now. Yeah.
One of the, I can remember one chart in particular that had Saturn and K2 and Mars, all together in the fifth house.
In the fifth,
there are some afflictions with the fifth lord, and so on. And, I don't know how you interpret K2, but oftentimes the theme around K2 is that you've already done that in past lifetimes.
Sure.
And you've been super successful at it. In this lifetime, you're meant to let go of that.
Yeah.
So, that's, I'm just always.
Oh, it's so hard because if they're not at the point where they're attuning to that, it can be hard, but it's okay. Sometimes, you have to be the messenger.
Right.
And be okay with that feeling hard for the person.
Yeah. I think it's applicable not just to children, because again, as an astrologer, I'm sure you see this all the time where people, they want something.
They want something.
They want a soulmate, or they want this or they want that. And sometimes it seems to me like, well, maybe you don't have it because you do need to focus on something else.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a hard point to get across.
Yeah. Well, now you're talking about Rahu, where is their desire, although that can often materialize what they want, but
yeah, they get it. And then they think, oh my goodness, did I really want that?
Yeah, right. I'll do anything for this. Oh no.
Yeah. What have I done?
Yes. See the chaos behind them, the carnage behind them. Yeah. Yeah. It is. It's so hard, isn't it? When we have a deep desire for something, but that's where we can turn to our practice, our spiritual practices. And go beyond, or go to our deepest desire is to, remember.
Say more about that. What were you?
Oh, well, our desires are telling us something, right? We want to connect. What is our desire? What are our desires? We want something, right? That we feel we don't have, but with our practices, we can then transcend that and transform it. And then we know our deepest desire is just to remember.
Yeah. Well, that brings up a good question. And I do have a way to get us back to the topic here.
Okay. Although I love meandering. It's fun.
Well, I just like to hear different points of view on these things. And so let's take this idea of desire. Some people take that idea of desire and they feel that, well, I have these desires because this is my path in life.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And some people have desires just simply because they are compulsive, And so I guess from your perspective, how do you recommend or what do you recommend to give people the capacity to sort out the difference between the compulsion or the pathological need for something versus knowing, oh, okay, maybe these desires are the ones that are guiding me, and maybe desire is not the right word in that situation.
Well, I think I would ask the person to see, is this life affirming for you? And go through the mistakes. If you want to follow your compulsions, see what happens. Yeah. I don't really recommend that, but is it a life affirming thing? Is it improving your life and the lives of others, even just as important or not?
Right.
But it's hard because compulsions, they have that quality of just taking over.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
But good for anyone that wants to learn how to discern between the two.
Mm-hmm. I'm stuck on what you said there about, is it life affirming? And I remember Mr. Davis always saying, well, is this a worthwhile or a wholesome desire? And I think that's something people need to think about, like what you just said. Is it life affirming for them, but is it also beneficial to the people that they're going to be impacting?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, can we take a moment just to see, okay, what are our effects going to be? Yeah.
Right.
Impact others.
Yeah. Well, that also probably takes a certain level of maturity as well. So,
and mistakes.
And mistakes. Yeah.
It's okay to make mistakes to a certain degree, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So going back then, when we started talking about, for example, the differences in spiritual practice and Kriya Yoga practice between male and female energy. And so one question I get a lot is, so when you're talking about practicing in relationship to the cycles of the moon and not practicing like the intensive pranayamas, the first 4 days of the cycle and a woman's cycle and so on, I often am asked, well, aren't I missing out on 4 days of opportunity in that month for spiritual growth, as though there's a sense of, because they're not able to do it or shouldn't do it during that time, that they're missing out on something. Do you understand the question?
Yeah. And I can't understand why people would maybe fall into that concern, but there's such power in the process of taking pause in things, right? Because sometimes we can practice, be diligent with our kriyas, do everything perfectly, in heavy quotation marks.
Right.
But then you start to become like kind of maybe unconscious about what you're doing, Right. And so if you can take pause sometimes, that will help to renew your awareness. Yeah. It's a wonderful practice to take pause. We can't really make any kind of change without pause, without taking pause. So we can use that as an opportunity.
So it's really the men who are missing out on not having the time for pause. Okay.
Well, I think there's many things that come your way in life that ask you to take pause too, right?
That's true.
There'll be things that will just come in that will ask you to take pause.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as far as practices go, though, so if there's not a recommendation to do like the Kriya Pranayama or the cycling of the life force through the spinal pathway and so on, are there meditations that are still okay to do during that time? So
I actually, during the first 4 days of the cycle or during pregnancy, you can certainly still sit in meditation, and you can even very gently. You don't do the actual breath component of pranayama, like drawing using your breath. You can very gently visualize prana moving up. So it's just done in a gentler way. Okay. So that's one.
Chanting through the chakras, would that be an all right?
You could do it internally and less. So just turning down the volume. That's, you want to be very attuned to what's happening. A birth mother is so connected to her fetus. We call it Dauhrida, the bicardiac state. There's this understanding in Ayurveda that you actually share your consciousness for a time. I believe it's after the 3rd month of pregnancy or so. The consciousness of the fetus comes in to that life, that little being, and then it's shared with the birth mother until birth, and a little bit after even. There's still that connection.
Yeah.
So you attune yourself to that, and you're just more gentle.
Right.
Just do everything more gently.
And what about I've got you here, I might as well ask, what about like chanting a mantra or a Gayatri mantra or things like this? Are those okay? Or
that's okay. Yeah, doing the Gayatri mantra, gentle. So you just want to sort of discern. You don't want to do any mantras that are about like that are harsh, that are ugra, that are a little more like fierce in their nature.
So no Kali or Shiva mantras.
Yeah. Well, unless, oh gosh, it is. It's so difficult. Unless, I'll bring it back to myself. I think it's okay, right, to be a little personal at times. So during the postpartum time, I was in a very vulnerable state, which happens for a lot of birth mothers. My mental state was very, very just vulnerable, very vulnerable. And so I would have thoughts come in called intrusive thoughts. So some thoughts of stress that were kind of intense come in. And so I would use Om Namah Shivaya whenever those thoughts would come in. And it was so helpful. So you can, it's like appropriately use things. You know, you can work with an Ayurvedic doctor or a Kriya teacher, you know, if you're pregnant, or, you know, if you want some clarity with those things. So we have the general and then we have the specific. So hard to speak in generalities sometimes.
And so, you know, kind of coming back to this idea of the experience of, you know, how the child is impacted by the parents, and not necessarily while the child is gestating, but after the child is born. What kinds of things do you recommend for parents to do who have, you know, a newborn or a toddler, or those kinds of things? Are there specific things that they can do for themselves?
Well, you know, we have to also deal with what's happening in our culture. So that's a whole other challenge, right? You know, unfortunately, both parents are often they both need to work often pretty early into postpartum time. But I do try to support the birth mother to just attune herself to the rhythms of what the newborn's going through, because they're still a little timeless. They don't know night and day, you know? And so you kind of have to be willing to surrender a little bit to that, to the sort of the wakings and everything of the little baby. So resting, it's easier said than done, but like resting when the newborn is resting, and knowing things around the house might fall apart for a little bit. But this is where we also need more community. It's really not meant to be done in a bubble. Right.
Well,
isolated thing.
That brings me to another question that has been, I've heard often, and this will kind of take us towards the end of our interview. I don't have any children, and I didn't have to raise any little babies or anything. I do have a teenage stepdaughter, and so I have a little bit of insights into that.
Sure.
But I can remember when I was probably 30, 28. I was teaching Kriya Yoga, and I was in charge of a meditation center. And people close to my age and younger would start, you know, having children. And they were good yogis, and they were dedicated, and they liked practicing meditation and going on retreats and so on. And now they've got a child. And I would often be asked, you know, how can I keep the momentum of my spiritual path while experiencing this? And, you know, I didn't have any experience, so I couldn't give any good advice. So you're a yogi, you're a mother, you're an Ayurvedic doctor, you have this information. What do you tell people?
It's not all or nothing. So I think people can be very discouraged when they first have children, because it is so all consuming. It is for a time. It gets a little more easeful as they get older, but it's still, they're always on your mind, you know, naturally. So not to throw out the baby with the bathwater, so to speak, the Kriya Yoga baby with the bathwater. It's okay if you just do a little. Even like the way it was very helpful for me. I was told to 3 minutes while you're nursing your child, just sit 3 minutes. So doing much less for a time is okay, because it will come back. Or read a couple of pages, like keep it super simple. And you know, having a child, it is a spiritual practice, because man, you need to be aware. You need to be aware. Or you can choose not to, but it's an opportunity. Yeah. So just do less and know that this is very, very temporary, and try to be present with what is happening, because that also is a Kriya practice. Be very present with being with your children.
Yeah.
It does go quickly. It goes very quickly. Yeah.
So don't worry about it. It'll be over soon enough.
Yeah, right. No. So then, you know, take the time to meditate for several minutes, and then, you know, your children see you doing that. And so my daughter, she kind of like, she used to call it meditationing. She's like, Mom is meditationing. She'll come and sit in my lap for 30 seconds or whatever, and then leave. She still often will tap my shoulder as meditating. And you just have to be okay with it.
Yeah.
And do it bit by bit. You know, you don't want to, of course, ignore them, but I'm very consistent. I said, okay, I'm going to meditate for 20 minutes. I'll see you after that, and just a little bit. And then eventually you'll have time to do more.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
so
you find ways.
It's a practice in just being present, which again, as you mentioned, that's certainly a Kriya Yoga practice, but also surrender as well.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Another question did come to mind if you have time for it.
Of course. Yeah, sure.
You had mentioned about your book, how it encompasses many different branches of Vedic science. And you mentioned Samkhya.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm curious, how's that play into the book?
Oh, gosh. Yeah. Well, it's kind of inherent in Ayurvedic medicine in of itself. So this understanding that we are not separate from existence, we're essentially all the same, but we coalesce into these different qualities in order for the divine to know itself or experience itself. And so one way that is described is in Ayurvedic medicine is through the doshas, Vata, Pitta, Kapha. And so in the book, I describe different common imbalances that can happen in pregnancy and describe that through what's it like from, if it's a Vata type of imbalance. So when there's more of these gunas of lightness and dryness and coldness versus Kapha, which are these qualities that are more earthy in quality, and how that manifests in the pregnant mother. And then what healing qualities, opposite gunas, not Rajas, Tamas, Sattva, by the way, they're different. Right. What healing gunas, qualities that you have in herbs and food, in lifestyle practices that can bring balance to these common imbalances. So that's one way that we discuss that, Sankhya. So it's kind of like it's underneath. Right. It's not like a direct description of Sankhya.
Yeah, I got it.
It's inherent in Ayurveda. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it was wonderful talking with you today.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I can't wait. We're going to launch the book, I think November 16th.
Okay.
Pretty sure.
November 16th, 2024.
Yeah. So by the time this comes out, it'll be up on Amazon. I'll have it on my website. And
is that a full moon?
I believe so. It's right close to it. I believe so. I think it's a few days before. I was trying to find the, supportive tithi for that. And Nitya, moon goddess, for that. I found, got some really good connections there. Yeah, it's about a 95-page book.
Okay.
And we'll be teaching classes too. What's that?
How many pages was it? Say that again.
About 95, 96 pages.
Okay. And then you're going to be offering classes related to it. Is that what you were saying?
Related to the book as well. But people can buy the book independent of that.
Okay. And there's one, well, yes, you did mention the name of the book. It was Garbhavati.
Yeah. Okay. An Ayurvedic overview of pregnancy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. And so for the classes, I mean, that's interesting. I didn't know you were doing that. How are those going to be offered, and how can people find out about those?
For now, they'll be offered online, and people will be able to register through my website or Mary Thompson's website, and I'll have that all up.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what's your website again?
It's my first name and last initial, shalint.com.
Okay.
That will be changing, but right now that's what it is.
Well, we'll put the whatever it is in the about section of this podcast.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, and it looks like you're going to have a Jupiter Moon conjunction on your book launch.
Yes.
And that's great.
Yes, exactly. Thank you for looking that up. Yeah, and the Nitya, she's also perfect for that too.
Yeah.
So it's great.
I'm a big fan of Jupiter Moon. I just feel that anytime the Moon and Jupiter are together or in trines from each other or in each other's signs, it always just seems to be good.
Isn't it good? And it's in Taurus, which is really beautiful for pregnancy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that as well.
Good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's really wonderful to see you. And
you too.
Shalin, Ryan Strong, and a few others, myself, We're part of the Kriya Yoga Alliance. So if you go to kriyayogaalliance.com, you'll get some more information there. And the Kriya Yoga Alliance at this time is offering Sunday services where each person presents on a topic, and then we all meditate together through Zoom. And then many of us, even David McGraw in Ireland, we get together from time to time and offer retreats like Shalyn and Ryan Strong and I are going to be doing in May in Encinitas, California. So it'll be good to see you there, Shalyn, and whoever ends up joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, it was good talking to you.
Talk with you.
Take care.
You too.